Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and happy Tuesday to you. I'm trying to remember what day it is. I always do my live streams on Tuesdays. Of course, it's Tuesday. Happy Tuesday to all of you. And today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is what does it mean to be brave? And it really struck me. I was recently in London. I saw this wonderful play called Ocean at the Lane's End. And it talks about this boy. He's terribly afraid. He doesn't have any friends. And he befriends a girl down the street, down the lane, and they go and fight monsters together. But at some point, he has to be the person who is brave. She's the one who's brave, always standing up to the monsters. But at some point, he's by himself and he's asked, can you be brave? And it's a question I want to ask ourselves also, to take a moment and to think about what does it mean to be brave? And how is that different from being courageous and having courage? The reason I want to talk about this is that as leaders, as disruptors trying to create change, we are oftentimes faced with so much uncertainty, so many things up against us. It can feel like no one understands us, no one sees us. We feel like we're all alone, everyone's against us. And it is exhausting. And you have to wonder sometimes, where can I get that strength to continue? Where can I have the courage to continue? So I would love for you to share in the comments. I'd love to hear where you're from. I have somebody coming in from Malawi, which is wonderful. Hello, very nice to see you. But share where you're coming from, but also share a time when you've had to be brave. Share that experience. Talk about what it took. How hard was it? Where did you draw that strength and that courage from? Because when we are faced with so many daunting things and it feels like there's no straight answer, there's a very strong chance it's not going to work. How do we keep moving forward? So let's get into this. So what does it mean to be brave? I've been doing some research around this and look at some definitions. Being brave, according to the Webster Dictionary, is to have courage. And courage is the ability to do something that frightens you, or to have strength in the face of pain or grief. And this is not to say that you don't have fear. If anything, there is a tremendous amount of fear, a tremendous amount of emotion that you have to look at and acknowledge to be able to then deal with it, to know that you can manage it and overcome that fear or those emotions and not have it stop you from taking action. That's what courage is about. It's not about not facing the fear, ignoring the fear. If anything, it's about fully experiencing it, fully embracing it, understanding it, and then continuing and choosing to move on despite that. And bravery, being brave, is the act of having courage. But I also think it's something very interesting. It's that moment when you've done all the preparation in the past, but in that moment, all of a sudden you're called upon in that moment to be brave, to draw on all the courage that you've been storing up, all of the things that you've learned along the way of how to deal with those fears and these emotions, to deal with uncertainty. In the face of all of that, continue to go forward. You may have time to prepare, you may not. But in the moment, will we rise to the occasion as leaders of these disruptive things that we're trying to do? Will we rise and be ready to be brave? So that's what I want to talk about. I'll give you some personal examples of this. First of all, I have to say, every time I go and push the broadcast button on these live streams, there's a part of me that goes, am I ready to do this? This is terrifying, to go out there and talk about something like bravery or vulnerability, or to put out a new idea. And it's terrifying. And so it never gets completely easy to the point where, like, oh yeah, I'll just push the publish button, I'll push the broadcast button, and it's going to be great. My palms are sweaty right now. I'm nervous. But I've been able to learn how to channel that into a state of excitement. And a good friend of mine said the difference between anxiety and excitement is confidence. And you have the confidence that no matter what happens, it's going to be okay. So for those of you who've been following me for a while, you've had to put up with the broadcast where there's video but no sound, sometimes sound but no video. So those are the hazards of live streaming. And we take it and know that it's not always going to be perfect, but it's better than not doing it at all. So I find for myself the publishing, getting on stage and speaking. I get dry mouth these days. I can't keep going. I have to stop and get some water to keep going on the stage. And it's all good. I'm not going to let that stop me for getting the message out there. But I'll tell you the places where I find the hardest times to be brave is when I suddenly thrown into a situation where there's somebody being super aggressive or has a really strong point of view or challenges me in a place where I'm not expecting it. And my natural instinct is to be a pleaser, to smooth things over, to make things better, to ruffle those, to smooth over those ruffled feathers, for example. And what I've been learning is that I'm not being brave. I'm not being clear about where I stand. I'm not establishing my boundaries as much as I need to. So I don't feel very brave. I don't feel like I'm being courageous in those moments. And so it's also about making sure that I take the time to step back and reflect and just go, how could I have been braver? How could I have had more courage? How could I have stood my ground in that moment? And then the next time it happens, to recognize it, be more prepared to be my braver self. So this is the key, I think, because what are those points? How do we build that capability that in that moment of need, how can we be brave? So I just want to see some of the comments here. Again, please share with us if the examples of when you've had to be brave. Rakesh has this to share: acting as per your convictions and values, despite the adverse consequences which may ensue. And I think that is a great example, I think, of knowing where you stand. And I'll talk a little bit about how important that is in the process of creating your platform for bravery. Another person, this is the person from Malawi, Blessings Milwaukee. It was a time when I heard the news of the death of my mom, but then our team had a drive vehicle, was trying to get to that place, drive many, many miles to get there, but drove and got there through that night. So again, I think one of the questions is, how do we step up in these moments, these really hard moments? Thank you for sharing that. And step up and do something that we don't think we're capable of doing, overcoming those concerns, those emotions, to be brave, to do the things we have to do. So I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be brave as an individual, but also as an organization. How do we actually go about doing this? And there were three things about how to do that. The first one, I think, is to not bury the emotions of what it means to be in the moment, to feel fear. But instead of burying them down and pushing them down, how do we get comfortable with sitting with them, understanding them so that we can deal with it? And so bravery, I think, means actually letting yourself feel these emotions without letting them defeat you or from changing your path forward. That I can understand and deal with these feelings. I can actually harness the power of these feelings to get really centered, as Rakesh was saying, on your conviction, on your values, what you see as your truth, and then be able to talk about that. I have this great quote from Brene Brown. I can't share it on the screen with you for various technical reasons, but this is what she says: daring greatly means the courage to be vulnerable. It means to show up and be seen, to ask for what you need, to talk about how you're feeling, to have the hard conversations. And she does a lot of work around vulnerability and strength and being true to yourself, knowing what your boundaries are. And I think that's such an important thing, because if you can do that for yourself, and even more powerfully, when you can do that as a team, when people feel comfortable saying to us, I don't know about this. I know we want to go forward, but I'm feeling nervous about this, not sure about this, how we're going to do this. I'm concerned, I'm afraid. For us to be able to talk about that from a point of strength and vulnerability, because you have to be strong to be vulnerable, that then allows us together as a team to say, oh, this is how we're going to work through that. We're going to acknowledge that emotion, that feeling, And we're going to work through that. And because we're going to do this together, we will have each other's back. This is, I think, such an important thing, because when we can say and talk about these things, then we can deal with it rather than push it away. We sometimes think that being brave and being courageous means not showing any emotion, pushing it away. And I think it's just the opposite. When you can face them, really, truly face them, and understand what they mean to you and to the other people on your team, then the strength of your convictions, the strength of your courage comes through in those moments. Now, that being said, I think the second thing, so the first one is to not bury your emotions, but to be able to sit with them, harness that power to be able to move forward, to deal with it. The second thing is to set boundaries, because knowing where you can go, how far you can push, how much courage you have is a really important thing. But it also helps you have some humility. So let me go a little bit and deeper into this. One of the hardest things we do is that we say yes to too many things. We say yes to too many demands, to too many requests. US organizations want to do more for our customers and for our employees. We're constantly saying yes. And as a result, we end up doing too many things, stretching ourselves too thin, spreading ourselves like peanut butter over a sandwich, and making sure that nothing actually sticks. So being able to say no to others, but also to ourselves, is a really important part of being brave, because it takes courage and it takes a lot of confidence to say no to someone, to say no to yourself, to be able to do less. And especially to know when your limits and your boundaries are being met. You can't go past that point. And it also gives you a strong sense of humility, that you realize you can't do anything and everything. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. So what will you choose to do? So I think being brave is knowing what you're capable of, knowing what those boundaries are, and not going past them. This is not to say that you stay in the center in your comfort zone. It's knowing where the edges are, really clearly defining the edges for yourself and for your team, and going right to the very edges and pushing those edges out, but not to the point where you're going to be not stretching people anymore, but you're stressing people. There's a big difference. So being brave means having that capacity, that ability to stretch all the way out to the very edge, but also know and have the responsibility to say, enough is enough. We can't go any further. This is so important, because I think putting in scaffolding, the support for your people, to allow them to set their boundaries, to be able to say, no, I can't go any further. And to talk about why, to talk about the emotions, to talk about why the boundaries are there, and to be able to hear it, understand it, and support them in that. And this is the key thing, is that if we're going to give people the power and the freedom to explore all these different areas, to be able to stretch to the boundaries, then we also have to respect that they're going to take responsibility and have accountability for what they can do and also what they can't do. So the first thing is to not bury emotions, to really sit with them. The second thing is to set those boundaries, really understand them and communicate them, because in those moments when you're expressing your boundaries, that's when you're being brave, when you're saying no to somebody. That's really, really hard. The third thing is to move forward, even in the face of uncertainty. And these are the things about uncertainty and fear. They're basically the same sides, two sides of the same coin. And again, being brave means that even in the face of uncertainty and fear, you're sitting there looking at this. It means that we're going to move forward. Even in the dark moments, we're going to move forward because we're driven by what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And the key part here, I think, is moving forward together with support, with other people. And oftentimes we'll feel like we're by ourselves, we're alone. And I think this is such an important thing for leaders, especially disruptive leaders. You need to build that support network, that in the darkest days, you know you're never alone. And that's why teams are so powerful, because if you can count on your team, you can count on your peers, you can count on a support network outside the organization, wherever you can find that support. It's preparing for that day and making sure that you have those systems in place, so that when you're sitting there facing the darkness, you realize you're not alone. you have the support of all these people and of your organization behind you to be able to make it through. So I want to take a moment before I go into a little bit more detail about how to systematically go through this and take some pragmatic actions. There's quite a few comments here. Thank you, Hamza, for joining from Pakistan. Marissa has a bunch of comments here. It's just always great to see you, Marissa. Stepping up to buck accepted tradition is hard, but change doesn't happen in our comfort zones. It is so true. You can choose to move forward and to challenge the status quo, or you can stay in your comfort zone, but it's going to be hard no matter what. It's possible to find common ground for possibilities among the undercurrents. And I think that's a really great point, Marissa, because when you can find that common ground with people who are trying to pull for the same thing, you can then find all the possibilities and opportunities to find your way around those obstacles that are pulling in your direction. So thank you for those comments. I just want to go into the last part today about how to actually be brave. And the first thing I would say is one of the things is to put in your systems for making sure that you have as much support as possible. One of my favorite things to talk about is resilience. How do we be resilient in the face of all of these changes? And I just joined a company called PA Consulting, and one of my colleagues has this beautiful resilience framework, which I'll be talking about next week. And that is how do you think about your operations, the physical assets that you have, the people, that processes you have, your customers and your communities, but also your core values, your vision, your strategy, your leadership. How do you think about all of these different elements of the support system from a resilience point of view, and be able to make sure they're as strong as possible so that when uncertainty comes along the way, when different scenarios present themselves, your system is resilient in the face of all of those changes. And having that confidence is absolutely amazing to have that. And the confidence, so if you have your systems in place to be able to provide that support, that resilience and support, then the second thing is having the confidence that it's going to actually work. And that means finding opportunities to do the stress testing, finding opportunities to apply all of the work that you've done in moments where you have to be courageous. Again, there's nothing like pushing that publish button, or pressing that broadcasting button, or stepping on that stage, or making those tough decisions when you don't have perfect information and you don't have all the data you need to build your confidence that it's going to be okay no matter what the outcome is going to be. And that I think is a really hard thing, because it requires that you step again out of that comfort zone, as Marissa was saying, and be able to put yourself in a situation where you're actually having to deal with those emotions, having to test your systems, checking and seeing your support systems of the things that you thought would be there to support you, what actually shows up and what doesn't. How strong is your team to be able to take on these challenges? Because when you do these over and over again, the smaller ones, you build your capacity to be able to take on greater uncertainty, and then the ability to be brave consistently, no matter what's being thrown in your way. And I think the last point is to really think about the team that you have around you. Asking these questions: can we be brave? Will we be brave? Are we prepared in our moment of need, in the moment of crisis? How will we be? How will we be for ourselves? How will we be together as a team? And don't wait until that moment comes along to say, oh, gee, I didn't think that we had these systems, or where are these missing systems? We didn't have them in place. It's really about taking that time now to prepare and say, and ask that question: will we be brave? Can we be brave? What do we need together as a team to build systematically in our systems, building that confidence in ourselves, but also in the strength of our relationships, to know that we're going to come together as a team. We're not going to fall apart. We're going to come together as a team, and together we're going to be so much stronger to take on these challenges and be brave for ourselves and for each other. So that's what I have for today. Again, this whole idea of being brave in the face of of all these challenges, I think it's something for us to take a pause and say, are we preparing ourselves? Do we have the courage? Do we have that reserve of courage that we know we can tap into? That when that moment comes, when that crisis comes, when that challenge, that uncertainty faces us, that we are confident that we can handle this, that we can be brave in the face of that. And also to have that discipline to be able to replay situations, to know how we didn't stand up to the courage of our convictions, that we did fall short, and how do we make up that gap in the future to be able to identify and prepare ourselves even more to do that. So just have this other great comment from Rakesh. When you're falling down, getting up, dusting off the causes of failure, moving with the same zeal requires courage, which only brave people can get out of themselves. So thank you so much for sharing that with Rakesh. At that point, I can't say it any better than that. I just want to say, I wish you the courage, the resilience to be able to pick yourself up in those moments when you fall short, and to be able to continue to be brave. It is the hardest things to do as a leader because you're up front. You're the person leading the charge. Everyone's looking to you to be brave, to have that courage to move forward. And here's one other things that Marvin has to add, just coming here at the end of squeezing it in with one last comment here. You have to see things through not only for the business, but for yourself. If it wasn't, if you wasn't supposed to be there, then you wouldn't be there. I love that. If you weren't meant to be there, then you wouldn't be. You were there for a reason. So you need to rise to the occasion. For me, that kills all insecurities and reboots my confidence, faith. Thank you so much for sharing that, Marvin. I think in the moment, we are leaders based not because we are being put there because of our title capabilities. We're called to be leaders in the moment because we happen to be there. And we're the ones who have to step up and accept those challenges. So great idea, Marvin, to say, when no one else is around, you've got to take it up. Take on put on that mantle of courage, of bravery, and be able to step it forward into that situation. Thank you, everyone. I love the comments today. Thank you so much for sharing them. Again, this is a topic that's hard. I don't think we put enough attention on it. Like, how will we be brave? Can we be brave in that moment of crisis? And for us to all answer that question by saying, yes, I can be brave. We can be brave. We are preparing ourselves for the uncertainty. And who knows how it's going to turn out, but we will face this. We will face it head on with courage and conviction that what we're doing is the right thing to do. All right, that's what I have for today. I want to just share, just for next week, I will be talking about resilience, sharing some of the research that some of my colleagues have been doing. I figured that was a really nice way to talk about bravery and courage, but then to talk about it and say, how do you systematically, pragmatically build resilience deeply into your organization and into yourself as a leader? So have a great week, and I'll talk to you next Tuesday. Take care. Bye-bye.